Hello, and for this video, I wanted to kind of make it after I had a discussion with a friend the other day because I don't think this subject gets enough attention. I think it's part of a bigger problem when it comes to uh, where the genders, man and woman, really stand in 2021 as it pertains to like the kind of like social relationships and what that entails, perhaps politically even. So, obviously, it's kind of been forgotten now, but in 2020 when the lockdowns were a lot more strict, one of the things that you saw rise up was OnlyFans. Like it boomed in popularity, just like Uber and all these other delivery services. Um, so yeah, OnlyFans really blew up, and I think that's pretty interesting because OnlyFans to me is just that next step of the kind of struggle really between man and woman right now in the current state of the world, where this kind of like tension between trying to form long-standing monogamous relationships is really going up against everything really, especially technology. I don't want to get too black pilled about what that means for a battle, and if that what could possibly happen. But I think one of the symptoms, that's a symptom of a greater problem. I think between men and women becoming so socially anxious and even confused, as like women now are like overcoming men in like the workforce and whatnot. A woman naturally before in these a more traditional setting, she usually likes to find someone a bit above her for security. It's kind of like an evolutionary, like she wants to marry up and he's more willing to marry down. But if you have a bunch of women who are becoming more and more successful than the average guy, then like she's just going to be unsatisfied. There's just going to be a lot of unsatisfied women running around, and there's going to be a lot of resentful men running around. So I don't think we pay enough attention to this resentment between man and woman. And one of the more interesting things I think you can notice on YouTube, especially if you go down the kind of like algorithm and see one of the more popular genres on YouTube, is this kind of like self-help advice, dating or attraction channels. And I think that's really interesting because never before, or at least I remember when I was younger, never before have we been told about how social media, like we have this way to interact and make relationships. And Facebook was really kind of like all the way back in the beginning, it was more about that kind of like fraternity bro kind of like, hey, this is a way to find out like if this chick is available and like if I can get it or not, and that kind of stuff. But now as we just have a whole generation going by that's been around this social media structure, we're now fixated on trying to figure out how to hype ourselves up in through these like abstract like guru concepts on YouTube to approach each other. And I think I don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of good to that content and maybe like the psychology rooted into it. Like I'm not gonna like deny that. I think that's interesting and like the content's good. Don't get me wrong there, but I do find it kind of interesting how popular they are. And really though, at the end of the day, these gurus and stuff, they will probably even admit that like they can only take you so far. They can only give you so much information, give you so many tips before you actually have to pedal to the metal and actually perform the task of trying to get a mate. And I just don't really think that people have taken into account enough like what that could potentially mean politically when we're seeing, less and less long-term, stable American family households. And what exactly can be done to salvage it or to turn that around, maybe, or can something better even happen beyond that, or what could happen that could make the most out of it? And I think one of the things is the problem with single fatherdom and or single motherhood, I should say. Not having that male figure to tell you, hey, don't just get trapped into this circus of your own mind. Because I imagine a lot of these young men, they're finding things like this sexual commodification that the internet can really just become. The internet can just really become this porn machine really easily for young men, and I don't think enough people talk about it. And if that's how you just perceive women as, then what's you're not going to be able to appreciate a woman for all of her femininity if all you care about is just her OnlyFans. And you're not going to be, and this isn't just porn, right? The concept of OnlyFans, this commodification of sex. Sex is, kind of for a man, I know it's just strictly just this kind of physical activity, but it's more than that. It's laying down with your equivalent, quite literally. And there's been centuries of myths written about finding your equivalent, your duality, your soulmate, if you will, and trying to break up your history and indulging in this kind of circus. Ultimately it's going to just fragment who you are as a man, and I don't think enough guys get that kind of advice. And when I tell people about that kind of talking point, which is kind of why I wanted to make this video to begin with, people actually are like, wow, I never really thought about it like that. And so yeah, that's in part why I wanted to make this video to begin with. And I guess if I wanted to just kind of also speculate about how, in addition to that, if you can just if you have the money to be able to just buy female attention, a lot of men, what's the incentive beyond just having that physical stimulant? So you have the problem of men just dropping out of this kind of market, and if you have a bunch of men dropping out of the market for that, then there's going to be a whole lot of women who really have nothing to do. And this is just going to further the idea that there's a whole group of men and women out there who it's no wonder that we have these problems with ideology and stuff like that, when you consider how broken down even the concept of dating is, and the anxiety and angst. And well, I think in a way, I guess what I would say about going back to those kind of YouTube guru videos is there's the threat of just overcoding someone with so much information about tips that they end up just becoming this mess of everyone kind of constructs this social mess, especially for a man who's trying to find a woman. There's always that comedic I think there's that Louis C.K. Stand-up where he's talking about he can see the young these two young people going on a date, and he can tell that the girl's decided, hey, I'm gonna have sex with this guy, but the guy is still he's 50 guys, he's trying to master all these different personality types. And I think that's I think people run the risk of doing that, not just on dating, but in general when we talk about technologies and these kind of discipline spaces and the exposures to them, how you can just get hyper fixated on these things to the point where you lose its usefulness. I think that it definitely applies to political ideologies too. Um, I want to be able to use not just the philosophy of, what I think is the best method of running society, but to be able to apply it to my own life and my own interpersonal relationships. I want it to be unified on a greater picture. And I think a lot of people actually desire that. They just haven't really stumbled onto that. And, if we were just going to go down just talking about, I guess we've kind of skewed off of the main talking points of this video now, and we're kind of talking more about how technology's affected, man and woman's relationship. One of the things I think is interesting that not enough people have noticed, especially in my age group, is that, when I was a kid growing up, we had these, like, concept of, like, e-dating, and, it was, like, super, super, like, taboo and considered, like, stupid. And, you had, like, series like Catfish and stuff like that, which is a very real, like, thing. Don't get me wrong, that's a problem, and you don't really want to be stupid and, get caught up in stuff like that. But, compared to when I was a kid, when it was just, like, considered, like, the guy who spends a lot of time on home internet was just this, like, weird, eccentric, like, nerd. But nowadays, it's, like, 50% of, like, dates that happen now among young people, like, start off, like, from interactions online. And to people like me, that's, like, really interesting, because that's not how it always was when I was a kid. And, I think that's one of the more interesting things to really talk about and, lay out as we kind of continue to go down this road of technology. It's not like we're going to turn the wheel back and hang out in a bunch of cabins again. But, that is enticing. But, you're talking about the concept of romance and stuff stemming from this kind of internet form of media, and just like how we talk about, like, these political situations and how it's expressed, how it's almost just as important, if not more important, that it's expressed through this form of the internet and kind of the decentralized attitude of that on alt tech. I think the concept of a romance is also interesting, and what that could offer up, not just in a struggle sense like I've laid out in this video, but, think about, the families that do survive and will survive, because there's plenty, don't let the media just blackpill you. There's tons of American families out there who are getting by just fine and are forming all the time. I see them all the time in public. What's getting them by? It's probably not, some obscure pagan, diatribe, or maybe even like a Christian doctrine. It might be, you never know. It's probably more likely, I would say, maybe, if I could assert that. But a lot of people are just secular, and so how are they still making this, like, monogamous relationships work out? And how I think underneath the veil of, like, these ideologies, when you see, like, these men's rights activists and these feminists over the years, a lot of them, they ended up going by the wayside in the end anyway. And when it comes to pedal to the metal, when it's their time to actually settle down, and evolution kind of steps in, political activism goes to the wayside, and starting a family becomes more important. And I think I just wanted to really brush up on that and make a short little video, since I haven't posted in a couple days, because I'm trying to think of some other ideas that could be much more elaborate and more interesting. But I still thought that this video was actually kind of important, just because I don't really see it get enough mention, and, like, how the state of the sexes is really going to drive our politics in the future. And more than I'm meaning, if you have a lot of young men and women who are starting to age, and it doesn't seem like their prospects of creating a long-term like family are in the works, and you can kind of see a link perhaps to using ideology as a way to get a sense of belonging that you won't get from I think they kind of have to, there's a lot of people who have to do it because since they don't have the family to go back to, we have like such a fatherlessness problem in the United States now that goes to all races now. Every race is doing worse off, as far as I saw, and especially among whites. It's actually accelerating. And so the idea that like we're living in this country where the dialogue really is the white man's got it all figured out, and you're watching the white family kind of disintegrate in front of you over the last like generation or so. It can be a bit concerning, but yeah, I'm gonna wrap up this video now. I've been going on long enough. I'll see you guys for the next one.